Hello, my name is Daniel Harvey, and today we'll be examining the film Grave of the Fireflies and what it means to be a mythic orphan using the main characters of this movie. So, what is the mythic orphan? So, the orphan has lost their parents, and we see this in all sorts of mediums. This could be something as simple as an old fable to the likes of Harry Potter or The Hobbit. It just depends on where you're looking. It's very convenient for the author to use this, because typically it's really easy just to develop a backstory of your parents dying versus having a fleshed out one. So the orphan archetype is usually composed of realists with some sort of solid virtue, but they really don't have a pretense. They could be empathetic, or they be against everyone. They have some sort of value they hold above everyone else. They could be accepting, or they could be disaccepting. They can be independent or they can be very dependent. It just depends on the path the creator takes. However, they can have a tendency to play the victim, and they can use prior misfortunes as an excuse to cover whatever problems they're having at the time. They can be negative and cynical, and they can blame others for problems and see the world as against them. So, with the context of the movie, Seda is a mythic orphan. He's lost his parents to the war effort of Japan, and he has to take care of his sister. With this, we see the aunt playing the role of a quote-unquote villain. She causes anguish for them with trying to get them to fend for themselves since they're not contributing to the war effort of Japan. We see this through the ways he buys supplies for him and his sister despite his aunt, and while also moving out eventually and not relying on his aunt for any help when it eventually culminates in the death of him and his sister. So now I'm going to give you a roadmap of the rest of my PowerPoint. And by this, I'm going to give you the three main points I'm about to argue. One, this movie is a reflection of war and the way this impacts the orphan. Two, I'm going to argue orphan with and without help, and that how that facilitates the creation of the orphan archetype in this aspect. And three, the unique ways death and rebirth are used to impact the orphan as a hero. So, the first point that I want to argue is the reflection of war. So, for a movie, Sato is the orphan, but here, the orphan is a reflection of the Japanese people. And what I mean by this, Sato really encompasses what many people struggled with during the war. You have death, you have heartbreak, you have just all these sorts of challenges that happen. And here, it's a unique twist. The orphan is actually a reflection of the Japanese people instead of being its own independent hero. And the movie handles this very well through its death and rebirth process, in which I will discuss in a few slides. So my second main point for this is orphan with and without help. What I mean by this is during the course of development of an orphan within the archetype, they really don't have any help, or they're abandoned by those that they love, or to try to seek help from. So kind of parallel this with Harry Potter. Sato goes to live with his aunt along with his sister. Initially, she's warm and welcoming and helps them survive, kind of like the Dursleys are to Harry, but as time progresses, she gets more fed up. What I mean by this is she believes that the kids are more of a nuisance more than anything. They keep their family awake because of his little sister's nightmares about the mom dying or the bombings, and he starts to have some medical problems too with constant coughing. She doesn't think they're helping with the Japanese war effort since they stay at home all day, and she kind of starts pressuring them by limiting their food, making them leave the household, and kind of limiting what they can do, because she's trying to push them towards helping with the war effort, but all she succeeds in doing is pushing them away. We see this through the way that instead of trying to help around the house or help with the war effort, Sato kind of does the kid thing and moves out as a form of response against this. And this serves as the catalyst for the movie and kind of serves as an excellent segue to my next point. So my third point, death and rebirth. From Joseph Campbell and Vlogger, we already know that death and rebirth is integral to the hero's journey and what it means to be a hero. But for this, movie, it takes an interesting spin on the orphan hero and death and rebirth. We already know the hero dies. And what I mean by this is that the first scene of the movie is the hero dying on us. That frames the rest of the story, but it also keeps it engaging because you want to understand why does he die and how this means for the story. And what I mean by this is how does it impact the journey? We still have the ordeal, the road back, resurrection, and the elixir to consider, but the hero's already died. So the way this movie takes a spin is that the hero dies, but it creates a hopeful future and a hope for the future that will come. So the mythic orphan really is an interesting aspect of the story because he represents Japan as a whole, not just a person. Japan during World War II really is impacted by the bombings of the United States, and we see the horrors of incendiary bombing and the death and destruction it causes, and how the war effort really impacts people. Sato dies for that war effort, more or less, because he's being impacted by it. His entire family and life is gone, and by the time the war is over, he can't recover and succumbs to dying just like his sister did. The movie really makes this orphan aspect impactful because it's a key aspect of the resurrection and elixir. See, his journey isn't over when he dies. Rather, in the resurrection aspect, he is physically resurrected with his sister in a spiritual type world, creating this sense that there's hope for the future and there's hope for them. Seda and Setsuka are reunited in death, and they look on to modern day Japan with hope. The message here is clear. There's hope in the future, but we've been in dark places in the past, but look where we are now. I think that's the most interesting way this movie has tried to frame the orphan hero. And well, I really can't say anything more than that. The orphan hero here is used as another person while being used as a hero at the same time. And the movie really blends reality and animation very well when discussing this. Thank you. I'm Dana Harvey, and this has been my presentation.